Hi, my name is Una Fogarty, and I'm from the class of 1990. Welcome to the third Kenyon Women Giving Back virtual event. We are so fortunate to have all of you with us for this unique opportunity that celebrates and honors the many ways Kenyon women give back, with a focus tonight on how two special women promote environmental justice. I, along with the other women on the Kenyon Women Give Back Steering Committee, hope this series will help build a deep connection with Kenyon women across generations, because there are so many fascinating women with so much to share. I would like to introduce our moderator this evening, Ruth Heindel. Ruth is the Dorothy and Thomas Jegla Assistant Professor of Environmental Studies at Kenyon. She is an interdisciplinary biogeochemist, and has conducted field research in Greenland, the McMurdo Dry Valleys of Antarctica, and the Colorado Front Range. Her field-based approach combines methods from ecology, geomorphology, and geochemistry to answer questions about the impact of changing climate and land use on sensitive alpine and polar ecosystems. And it goes without saying, but Ruth is the perfect person to moderate this panel tonight. Ruth, the Zoom room is yours.
Thank you so much, Una. I'm really pleased and honored to be the moderator for our conversation tonight. I'm really excited to get to know our two speakers. Before we get to the questions, I just want to cover a few logistical details so that you all know how this is going to work. Currently, you all are on mute, and you'll stay that way for the majority of our conversation. But we're going to be sure to save some time for questions, and we really hope that you all have some questions for our panelists this evening. So there are two ways that you can ask questions. One is through the chat function. You'll click the chat and you'll be able to send a question to send questions here. And you're welcome to do that anytime during the conversation. If you have a question that comes up and you want to write it down before you forget it, hit send, and we'll come to it at the end. And then we'll also pause for questions, and you all can unmute yourselves then and or use the raise hand feature, and we'll be sure to get questions that way as well. Okay, so I want to kick things off by introducing our panel, and in fact, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. For the two of you, I would love you to tell us a bit about your background. So where you grew up, and then also your Kenyon background. So why did you choose Kenyon? What was your major in your graduation year? But then also something about your current work. So where do you currently work? How long have you been there? What is your role in your organization? What does your organization do? So first off, we have Colette Pichon Battle. So Colette, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Ruth and Una, for starting us off, and peace everyone. So glad to be with Kenyon folks. I never get this. So shout out to my colleague, my classmate, Lorraine Schrader, who said, you want to talk to Kenyon people? Yes, I always do. So thank y'all for having me. I also mentioned to the folks who put this together that when I was at Kenyon, my name was Coco, and only when I'm with my Kenyon family and my real family is that a name that I welcome. So welcome that. But you can call me Colette Pichon Battle, or you can call me Coco. I'm in the class of 1997. Lord have mercy. I was an international studies major, world religion minor. And I ended up at Kenyon, believe it or not. Sorry to be such a truth teller in the moment, but actually I'm from Louisiana. And at the moment that I was choosing colleges, I just wanted to get out of the highly racialized South. And in my mind, Ohio was as good as I could get. My mom told me you can go anywhere as long as it's paid for. So shout out to the Kenyon Fund and the other scholarship opportunities that people like me have and can use in order to go to Kenyon. My background is South Louisiana Bayou girl. I think in my entrance essay, I called myself a tomato, a Creole tomato. And I remember somebody bringing that back up when I graduated, like, darn it. But the truth is, I come from the land of good food, a lot of swampy, shrimpy, crabby things. I am a daughter of the Gulf and deeply rooted in my community. I can see a few of my classmates on the call right now. I can see Kelly, I can see Heather. Shout out to the class of 97 who really responded to an email that I sent to one of my colleagues, my classmates named Matt. It was back when email was still a new thing. I didn't even know you could send it around, but Hurricane Katrina hit my community. I sent an email and all of a sudden my classmate Matt sent it around. And all of a sudden my family was receiving help from Kenyon alumni. My friends were concerned about what was going on in the Gulf. And since then, I've built a nonprofit organization now called Taproot Earth that is working specifically on climate change in the Gulf, working with Black and Indigenous communities on the front line. We've just gone national as of July, and I'm excited to be in this conversation with Karin to just talk a little bit about the state of our environment right now and the role that Kenyon women get to play. It's such an honor to be here. Kenyon was one of the best decisions I ever made, and I'm always glad to be back.
Thank you so much, Coco. So we also have Karin Chamberlain here. So Karin, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am just meeting Coco for the first time on this call as well. I'm totally thrilled. We have similar backgrounds. I actually majored in international studies in the focus on Latin America at Kenyon. And I too have a background in food. I grew up on a farm in New Hampshire. I say my career trajectory has gone from farming to financing food. So after Kenyon, I joined the Peace Corps. I was doing livestock production in South America. I thought I was going to save the world. Peace Corps made me realize I didn't need to save the world. So I needed to find a different career path. I got my master's in economics at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. And while there, I needed a job to support myself. Having earned a whopping $70 a month in the Peace Corps for 3 years is hard to save to live in Boston. So I got an internship with a company called Trillium Asset Management. This was in 1997. And my advisor at the school was really involved in the Kyoto climate change protocol. At this company, I was hired to do an environmental assessment of companies, and I had this aha moment, like, oh, we can invest in companies that don't cause problems that we then need nonprofits to fix. So I was like, you know, and then just fast forward, I ended up wanting to move back to New Hampshire from Boston, and a position opened up at Clean Yield Asset Management. They wanted somebody to do their alternative investments with a focus on regenerative agriculture. And so I said, hey, I can, you know, I was trying to get out of finance, but I was like, if I could finance good food, local food, sustainable food, I'm all in. So I am speaking to you from my 50-acre organic sheep farm in New Hampshire. That's my second job, where I feed my community. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karin. So my first question to both of you is really grounded in this concept of philanthropy. And the literal meaning of that word is the love of humankind. And I'm going to, you know, have you think back a little bit to your Kenyon roots again. So thinking back to your time at Kenyon, and how did your time at Kenyon influence that path to seek careers that do show this love for humankind by protecting and preserving the environment and with a social justice lens? So what was it about the Kenyon experience that guided you on that path or helped you choose that path? And maybe Karin, we could start with you this time.
Sure. I mean, I would say it was probably peer pressure, perhaps you could say, from my from my fellow classmates at Kenyon. I'm not sure if it's still around, but the Kenyon World Lead Society. It was a volunteer group when I was at Kenyon back in '92. Sorry, I didn't say I graduated in 1992 from Kenyon. And we volunteered in the Knox County schools, providing support to school teachers. And then, thinking about graduation in the 1992, it was similar to perhaps what some of the graduates are facing right now with the economy was kind of tanking. There wasn't a lot of job opportunities. And if I'm not mistaken, there were 4, 5, or 6 women from Kenyon that decided to go into the Peace Corps. And so that planted the seed of that. And here I am.
Great, thank you. Coco, what about you?
Yeah, what a great question. I did some volunteering. I was, really, really social, to be honest. I was trying to get into everything. Kenyon was such a new experience for me. It was very different from the South. It was very different from anything I had ever seen. I didn't understand people's accents. I didn't understand there were words being used. I had a bagel for the first time at the bookstore because somebody was trying to explain to me that bagels are good, but this wasn't real. I got to go to New York. I was learning about, I was on the volleyball team. I remember some of my teammates were, just from the West Coast, coming from the Midwest. They just very different. It was an experience for me that helped me to see that the world wasn't just the South, that the world was much broader than that, I had a lot of friends who were very different, but very kind in the end, right? When despite the accents and all of the weird foods, people cared. I also remember making long conversations in Pierce Hall with random people. And I'm, of course, one of those people, all my classmates will attest, who won't shy back from an argument. In fact, I probably was looking for him, but would often try to find, different opinions and to really see what that was like. It has really prepared me for a life as an attorney, as an advocate, someone who is every day faced with people who are very different from me, to convince them over and over again that our humanity is the thing that holds us together. If it weren't for Kenyon, I would not have had a Watson Fellowship. So I didn't go to Peace Corps, but there was an opportunity to get a Watson Fellowship. And Dean Keeney at the time helped me to do my application. And I got a Watson Fellowship and went to Africa for a couple of years after I graduated. I think between Kenyon for 4 years and the Watson, all before I went to law school, really sort of opened me up both to different types of people, but also a broader way of seeing the world. I remember being in English classes and in classics classes and religion classes, and just really thinking about how we live and who we are in a much broader way. And I think it's really prepared me for this time. The humanity of Kenyon, I think the deepest parts were seen when I had my first winter, which, by the way, went from October to April. Anybody remember that? I'm just saying, class 97, y'all know I'm not lying. It went from October, the first snow, which I played outside in the snow and was very excited about, to April, where I was just like, oh my God, I think I'm gonna fall down. I don't know what's happening. Where's the sunshine? But I remember lots of people who understood this girl's coming from the sunshine. She has no idea what a Midwest winter is. A lot of kindness, but also a reality that where I was really different, and the people around me were who I was going to need to depend on. And that lesson has played for me over and over again, and it really started at Kenyon.
Great, thank you. Well, I will say that I did see white precipitation out my window yesterday. So the Ohio winter, but then next week it's going to be 70s. So, this crazy world we live in right now. So Coco, you have written about climate change. We're going to get deep right now. So you've written about climate change as a system or a symptom of a problematic and extractive system, right? So climate change is a symptom of this larger problem. And this economic system that we find ourselves with right now, has been built for a few at the expense of many and at the expense of the environment. And it's one thing to kind of acknowledge that this is the system that we face today. But as we look towards the future, my question for you is, how do we move away from that? And what does a more just economic system actually look like? So Coco, I know that's a huge question.
Yeah, right up my alley.
Yeah. Or what is the start? What is the start of that path?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I appreciate the question with this group of people in particular. One, I think as women, we're going to play a role in the transition that is and must occur in order for us to survive as a human species. So shout out to all of you who are dealing with kids or parents or other things while you're also listening in, because this role that we play as women, I think, will only become more obvious and paramount as we begin to really accept and acknowledge that we are not heading toward climate change. We're in it. And that hurricane that hit my community 17 years ago was a bell for me, for my classmates, and for many others that this thing is real and it's coming. I think how we change this economic system. I mean, this is tough, right? When I went to Kenyon, I was with some of the wealthiest people I've ever seen. I've never seen that kind of wealth before. I didn't understand it even really at that age, what it was to have a family foundation, what it was to even, I remember somebody giving back to Kenyon and helping a new scholarship get formed, and, hadn't really thought about what it is to accumulate that kind of wealth and to do good with it. And what happens when people choose not to. I want to say it's hard to talk about this because many of us are living inside of a system that was created to work exactly how it's working. You're okay, your family's okay. All of this, much of this can be an theoretical or educational exercise, but for many communities like mine, that is just not the reality. We're in it, people are struggling. I will say you don't want to see what I saw after Katrina in my community. It was the thing that drives me every day, 17 years later. I don't think anybody should have to go through that or experience that, but the world is going through it right now. Those places where Karin went in Latin America, the places where I went in Africa, they're experiencing this stuff every day. And it's not just the people at Kenyon driving it, it's the American culture that's really driving this imbalance. And it's not just wealth, it's consumption. And it's not just consumption, it's production. And it's production and consumption for a profit margin that leaves our humanity completely out of the picture. So what do we have to do? We're going to have to connect back to our humanity. We're going to have to ask ourselves a question: is there anything more valuable than the money in your bank? Because if the answer is water or life or community, then it means we're going to have to do economy in a very different way. Finance. I'm glad someone like Karin is in there. We're going to need some good people bucking these systems. But the system as it sits right now is rooted based on requiring extraction, exploitation, and a devaluation that has gotten us into a global imbalance. We are going to have to shift our economic system. That is not easy news for those of us who are comfortable in this current system, but it is the truth. And this is the work that we've been trying to do. I think the first step is there's a set of principles called the Hemish or Hemes principles. And one of the principles says you need to have a commitment to your own self-transformation. And that's something I try to do every day. What is it that I need to learn? Who is it that I need to be in alliance with? What is it that I need to listen to, which is not the same thing as what do I know and what can I tell? I'm still on a learning journey and still on a journey to become a good human or a better human, but it's going to have to start with self-transformation and an examination of yourself, your beliefs, what you value, where you put your money, how you participate in a system that everybody at this point is pretty clear is discriminatory, unfair, and unjust to at least certain sectors of this population that we have deemed to be less valuable than others. Then it requires you to actually say, what do I change? And how do I start? And I think as long as we can get to that point, we can figure the rest out. The problem comes when we look at the system and we say everything is fine, or there's nothing that we need to talk about. But when we can get to the point and say, you know what, I know we're participating in a system that we have to change. Where do we start? Who do we connect with? I think that is a great starting point. I also hope that folks of Kenyon continue to support our classmates, our brothers and sisters who are going through disaster. I mean, it really was one of the most warming moments for me to know that no matter what else I had from Kenyon, I had a network of people who knew me and who cared about me and who didn't need anything else other than me asking for help to show up.
Thank you. Karin, I really want to bring this question to you because, right, you work so hard, to transform this economic system. And so I want to ask you how your work has addressed some of these fundamental problems with our economic system. And for you, what does that kind of more just economic system look like?
Sure. So, when I was in grad school, I was climate change was first and foremost, and then I worked in the financial system and indexing, which is very wonky. Think about S&P 500, but I created indexes that had environmental screens and took climate change into account. That could be another whole nother lecture for another day. But just kind of really trying to take that into account. What I would say is, one of the reasons I moved out of working for KLD and MSCI and indexing is it felt I was so high up here and just not really feeling like I could really make a difference. So working at Clean Yield, which was founded in the 80s, and in reaction to the apartheid in South Africa and divestment, Clean Yield was founded, and they have done fossil fuel free investing since the late 80s, early 90s. So this has been at the core of our business for a very long time. We first started doing what we call alternative investments. So that would be everything that is not a publicly traded stock or bond. We always have what some people call ESG, environmental social governance screens on the public equities. We do shareholder advocacy around climate change. We don't invest in any fossil fuel companies, but I'll try to talk a little bit more about what I do, which is alternatives. And we made our first private investment in Organic Valley, which is a worker cooperative. So we really support worker cooperatives. It's a dairy worker cooperative. The second investment was in Heindel Organic Seed Company, which was one of the first organic seed companies. I'm not sure if people realize this, but much of the organic food that you consume, the seeds are not organic. They're produced in a conventional manner. So this company's trying to achieve that. But I think Coco was talking a little bit of, mentioned words that we use a lot is kind of extractive. A lot of our current finance and investment system is extractive. And we think about regenerative investments. Most of our clients are high net worth individuals or accredited investors. That means we have $1 million minimum to work with us. So we work with very, very privileged people who can, but also they recognize the fact of where their wealth came from. So I would say the vast majority of the clients, the reason they come to us is they're not looking to extract more wealth from society, extract more wealth from the environment. They feel that they have a responsibility to use that money to do good for society. I'm actually working with 3 different foundations right now who are trying to draw down the capital in a foundation. They don't really care about what the return is. They see that climate change is urgent. They want to deploy that capital fast, and they want to deploy it to companies and other people who are taking risks and really are going out there on trying to address climate change issues. A lot of our focus is regenerative agriculture. And again, this is through very specific organizations such as Iroquois Valley Farms. And what they're doing is they recognize that the transition to organic farming takes 3 years. This is high cost. So they're working, there's a term called integrated capital, which combines grants, technical support, and loans or equity investments to try to support this transition that we need. And I'll stop there because I could just keep going down. But I just, one other thing, talking about climate change, I was actually at High Mowing this morning for a board meeting, and they're having problems with housing costs and hiring employees for their firm. And in part, it is climate refugees that are coming from California to northern Vermont because they see that as a good place to live. And these are people who can afford to move right now, and they're displacing Vermonters.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting how, right, these regions that you both are from are connected in this way of migration from one into another. Karin, it's so interesting to hear all of this about the, funding behind this transition to regenerative agriculture. And it's something that comes up in some of my courses at Kenyon a lot. And so I want to, I know that you have spent time farming and you live on a farm now. So I want to talk or hear a little bit about your connection to place, and for both of you, what a connection to place means. So for you, Karin, how does your experiencing with farming and your connection to land, how has that shaped your work?
Well, I kind of go back to the way that I was raised. So my parents bought this farm. My mother is from Germany. And when she moved here in the late 60s, she didn't trust the US food system. So she wanted all the food that her family ate be raised on a farm. Now she comes from Stuttgart, Germany, a relatively urban area. My dad is from just outside Detroit, Michigan, grew up in a relatively, urban suburban area. But they just bought this kind of rundown farm. The house I'm in, you can kind of see the beams you're looking at are over 200 years old. There was snow blowing in through the walls. My poor mother jumped on this farm, but she wanted to make it work. And that's what she did. I thought everybody ate organic food, shopped at the local co-op with canvas bags, ground their peanut butter, shopped in bulk, picked up eggs on the side of the road and just put the money in a little bucket and bought bread baked at the local bakery. I grew up in a bubble. I am back in my bubble. I wish I wasn't so much in a bubble, but as far as sense of place and community. So for me, when people say well, what made you interested in regenerative agriculture? I'm like, I just thought everybody did regenerative agriculture. Kenyon, again, with the Amish baking our bread and stuff, it was still a little bit of a bubble. And then being in the Peace Corps in Ecuador, again, everybody was, the land is what supported them. Pachamama, Mother Earth, that's what provided for you. And in Boston was my aha moment. I went to Shaw's and bought some vegetables, and I was like, this is not a vegetable. Who eats this? And that was my wake up moment. Okay, all right, I have lived a very privileged, sheltered life. But my sense of place and community too is just being really appreciative of, the community I live in. I live on a dead end dirt road. There are 5 houses. There is a libertarian, a guy that flew a Trump flag. We have Bernie people. We have, mainline Biden supporters, but we're all neighbors and we all help each other out, whatever it is. And everybody on my street gets a lamb. They take care of them. When I go on vacation, if somebody escapes, they know exactly where the grain is. They put them back in the pasture. One person has eggs. The other person has a great view from her deck. We drink there. And it's just, it's just a sense of community. And I feel, very privileged to live here.
Thanks, Karin. So Coco, to bring this question to you, you're fighting for land that is currently disappearing from sea level rise, and in the path of all of these storms, just Hurricane Ian, another one of these really, catastrophic storms. And so I wonder how your connection to place has changed through that kind of realization that, the very place that you're so connected to is also disappearing. And yeah, can you talk a little bit about your connection to place?
Yeah. Well, this is the hard question for me. If there's one, this is the one. So I live just outside New Orleans, Louisiana. I live just north across a lake called Lake Pontchartrain, and I live in the unincorporated areas of Slidell. For my mother's side of the family, which is where I was raised, this has been their land since the 1770s. My grandmother is Choctaw. My grandfather was Creole. If you were a free person of color, it's a very complicated history, but the short version is if you were a free person of color or indigenous person, you were not where the Black people were. You were in a totally different area. And in that area with lineage to the French or the Spanish, actually, you could own property and you could have property. And so in addition to my indigenous heritage, my Black heritage has been in this place for a very long time. And that was really what I felt when I went home after Katrina. First of all, we've lived with hurricanes, water, floods, and all of these things all my life. These things aren't new. But to see how different this storm was, to see the destruction that the VA, the old people in my community, had never seen before. There were no stories about. There was no reason the water should have been that high. To see that we were experiencing something that history hadn't yet given us any information on was a wake-up call. Because while I didn't know at the time that our land was going to be lost to sea level rise, what I could feel immediately was that something had changed and that we were not safe. And so this land that has held my family, that has been the source of our recovery, you know, in climate recovery and disaster recovery in the United States, if you don't, quote, own property, you don't qualify for a lot of government assistance. And it's not that my mom had enough money as a teacher to own property. It's that it's been in my family for such a long time. So we were able to get a FEMA trailer. We were able to get access to things, but it wasn't because we had money, but it was because we had land. And that land has been the source of a lot of my inspiration. And I think it gives me the courage to say really difficult things to really big audiences, to be honest. The truth is that this land that my family has been on since before the beginning of the United States will be lost to sea level rise no matter what we do. With the best efforts, everything that I know, our language, which is a different language. My mother is one of the last speakers of our language in our community. And mostly our elders who spoke the language ended up passing away very abruptly and quickly in the aftermath of Katrina. We're seeing this now in COVID. When these disasters hit, it's not just about the trees that go down. It's about the human impact and the human toll on your psyche, on your physical body. And for our elders, it's a stressor that takes them before their time. And so my mother is one of the last speakers of our language. She's 77. And when she's gone, when the people around her are gone, we would at least have the land and the stories to talk about. But now we know that our land will be gone to sea level rise. And so who are we? You know, we are people who actually identify by our bayous. When someone says, who are you? I say, I'm a Pichon from Bayou Liberty. That's how they know who I am. What happens when there's no more place? Who are we? And this is a conversation I've had with people in the Houma Nation, which is the largest tribal nation in Louisiana, as they received, along with other indigenous nations, the first federal dollars for climate relocation due to sea level rise in South Louisiana, asking the question, who are we if we are not in our place? So this tie to home for me has been my fuel. It is the hardest thing for me to talk about because there is a long goodbye here. There is a long contemplation about the land that I grew up on, the trees that I know, the places that I know all the stories of, and what it's gonna mean when my niece grows up and can't see them anymore, or when her children grow up and it's not there anymore. But it's also been a source of real courage to tell folks who are not in this situation that this is happening, because most people don't believe it. If you don't have someone you know telling you that the land is disappearing, why would you believe that? That's so hard to really contemplate. But the truth is, Louisiana is losing land at one of the fastest rates on the planet. We're 1 and 2 with like Bangladesh. And we are in deep solidarity with many of the island nations who are already having to deal with this real problem of relocation, not the relocation that comes when you have resources, the relocation that comes when you don't have anywhere else to go. And so this tie for me has been really special. It is painful to talk about. It's painful to bring up, but it is fueling because I am a witness to the last days of my land and my people. And it's an important role. And so I make sure I take a drive whenever I'm home. I take a drive in the swamp. I take a drive around my neighborhood. I go touch the big old trees, 400, 500, 600-year-old trees. I touch them. When the storms come, we go witness which trees went down. We witness the damage. It doesn't sound like anything big, but I know the Kenyon family might understand the importance of being inspired even by the things that hurt us, that are a little painful. And so I use this to inspire me as I go and I talk around the world now about the realities of this climate crisis and what many communities like mine are facing. It's not something for the future. It's happening right now, and we're having to contemplate erasure and having to make our stand. Thanks
so much, Coco. It's really powerful to hear you talk about your connection to a place like that. And it makes me think of also some of the Arctic communities that I'm familiar with who are currently, their land is eroding into the Arctic Ocean. And it is the same, talking about culture, also the loss of culture and language that is so clearly connected with the land. At this point, I want to just see, Annie, if we have questions from the audience, and also to kind of take a moment and see if there are questions from folks that we can work into our conversation.
Yeah, I do have a question from Autumn. Autumn asks, how do you balance mourning with continuing the work? And how do you keep going in the face of this immense tragedy?
Yeah, and this is actually a question connected to one that I had just about hope, right? So similar to what Autumn is asking here. And maybe Karin, we can start with you.
Wow.
These are now questions that we haven't had a chance to prepare for, so we can take a little bit of time to think about, right? And hope is this, right? Like how are you? There is so much, right, that we're faced with on a day-to-day basis, and how do we keep moving forward?
Yeah, I think in part it's just taking the opportunity to step back and sometimes share in forums like this, like what you're doing, and more, I should say, what the organizations that I work with are doing to support climate change, environmental justice, Indigenous people's rights. One of the prepared questions that you had was about land acknowledgement. And just, it's an ongoing kind of learning process for me and for my company. And I think it's just really, and I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but like for me, it's more just being curious, being inquisitive, being open to learning and meeting new people, and also understanding that sometimes the actions that we take have good intentions, have end up being not the right answers, and recognizing that and being willing to accept that and open and learning to change. And then having the opportunity to share that with others and realizing, wow, what I when I'm like right now at quarter end doing like QA for reports, I'm just like, oh, I hate my job. But then I get on a call and I get to talk to all of you wonderful people and meet Coco, and I'm just thinking, wow, there are all these amazing people in the world that are doing amazing work, and I'm really lucky to have the job that I do and work with the companies that I do and with the clients that I do. So I think that keeps the hope alive, that there are a lot of really passionate people out there that are wanting to make change and working to make change.
Wonderful, thank you. Coco, what keeps you hopeful? What keeps you moving forward?
I just saw my roommate from Kenyon, Beth Palamaki, here, and I was just remembering, like, she was always so happy. I didn't know why. She always had, I think she must have been kin to Karin. She always had baked bread and all kinds of things. And she was always so happy. And I'm just thinking about that. I have so many people in my life. Love to you, Beth. Good to see you. I have so many people in my life who are good, who are just good. Good mamas, good aunties, good teachers, good nurses. Even just thinking about Karin, like, anytime I hear anybody in finance, I have like a whole little face thing that happens that I have to control. But, what if we have some good people in there trying to make a difference? I feel like I'm so blessed that I get to see, yes, all of the challenges that we all see, but sometimes I get to see the best of humanity. And it's usually in really tough moments. And it's usually in moments that you don't expect to see us step up to our goodness, but I know it's there. And I live in the South. I live in the red block South, hurricane zone. I mean, like, if you want to know where it's going down, it's going down, but I still get to see good people. I still get to know good people. I still get to see people helping each other. And so I think my hope is that good wins over evil. And I really believe that narrative. You know, I believe it. It's part of my spiritual belief. It's part of my Star Wars love. It's part of my my Kenyon experience. I think good can win. I just really want to reiterate what Karin mentioned, which is about good intentions. Because good intentions aren't always good when they manifest themselves as actions. And I think we have to really be careful and start doing things a little differently. My hope is that I've seen over the last couple of years, people in a very tough moment around this country say, maybe there's something else to learn. Maybe there's something I don't understand. Maybe there's another perspective I need to hear. And I think that gives me hope, because if one day folks can hear the realities of the climate front lines, not just the victimization of communities like mine. We are not victims. We have been targeted and marginalized, and the system is working exactly as it's intended. We are not victims, but we do have something to say and something to contribute. And if more folks are willing to listen to Indigenous communities, Black communities, frontline communities, poor people, if folks are willing to listen to them and value what they have to contribute, I think we can get somewhere. So I'm hopeful. I see it happening all the time. I see people checking themselves and challenging themselves. And I think there's a moment here that we can all feel. And my hope is that we choose the right side. Well, not the right side, the good side. Choose the good side and make the choices based on humanity and love, as opposed to profit and domination and individual achievement. It's gotten us to the wrong place.
Thank you. I think it's, the focus on people, right, came out in both of your answers. And for me too, it's the people, like the Kenyan people, right? The students that I see every day, for sure, is what keeps me hopeful. Annie, do we have more questions from the audience?
I do. We have a couple of questions. So Kathy asked a question. I think that this is, I don't know if this is a statement or she's looking for some inspiration here. I have a question about direction for self-transformation or recommendations that can be made.
Yeah, wonderful. And, this was also kind of very closely connected to a question that I had about these tangible actions that, this audience could take, right? So talking to this community, but also a larger community of like, okay, where do we go? What's the step? Coco, do you want to start off this one?
Yeah, this one's interesting because, there's lots I can say to you, but mostly this is what I say to me about my own self-transformation, which is, just take a minute and really get clear on who you are and where you come from. It's important to recognize that living in this country with all of our privilege and wealth has really severed ties most of us have to the places we come from. If you're Irish, like, do you know your history? If you're Italian, do you know that history? If you are any of these other millions of things, you're German, Karin mentioned her mom, like there are traditions and beliefs and pieces of your culture that are tied to the land. You don't have to extract or exotify someone else's culture. You don't have to replicate an indigenous way of doing things. You can really go back to your history and find out what was the relationship of your people with land. There's something there. I just returned from Ireland studying some very ancient traditions, not just around agriculture, but also around revolution. And what it means to be in a particular state of human subservience and fight and not give up and keep going. These are the things that can inspire all of us. Who are you? Where are you from? And what is your relationship to this planet? I think the next step is what are the principles of your family? What are the values of your family? What do you hold? Do you just is it just like let the kids be free? I mean, the time for that is over, y'all. It's time to offer some direction. Hey, in this family, we treat people a certain way. In this family, we make sure that folks are okay. Like just a set of values and a level that as a family unit, you are going to set with your children, with your partner, so that we can start to build better communities. And I think at the community level, especially those of us who are Kenyanites and we know how to do the right type of buying of the right things and the good breads and the good food, your job is not to sit in that space. Your job is to go somewhere much more uncomfortable. Where are you on the advocacy fights that the Black community in your town is fighting to keep that really poisonous thing out of their community? Have you shown up for that fight? Where are you when people just need you to make a comment about no more drilling or no more pipelines? The indigenous folks, the Black folks in the South are calling for people to just make a comment to the federal government that we don't want this anymore. But what happens when powerful people in positions not only use their voice for themselves and their livelihood, but for just a better community? I would say go find those fights. If you live in an urban area, there's a Black community near you fighting for survival. If you live in a rural area, there are people looking to access basic things just to survive. We need you to show up for them, not just for yourself. And then finally, I would say we have to rethink how we look at our natural resources. Right now, the only mention of water in the Constitution is around the commodification of it, but it is what we all need to live. Why do we live in a society where people have to pay for water? Have you ever thought about that? Have we ever thought about these systems that we're so interested in upholding? It's time for radical and bold ideas, not just around solving a crisis, but around building a new society. And it all starts with how we transition ourselves and transform ourselves. It's not easy. So prepare yourselves to be uncomfortable, but a little discomfort on the American side relieves tension and pressure globally. And I think we owe it to the globe.
Thanks, Coco. I feel inspired for that kind of self-transformation starting very on a personal level. Karin, thoughts about this?
Well, Coco, you're a hard act to follow. So I guess, on that level, what I would say is, to be the change you wish to see in the world, I would say take two different paths. One is get involved in something that you're passionate about and share that enthusiasm. The second is get involved in something you're not comfortable with so that you can learn, push yourself out of that. But also just think about, it can be in those actions or other actions about investing in your community. Recognizing that not everybody is like my clients who are high net worth individuals, but there are so many ways that you can invest through volunteering, through supporting cooperatives, and cooperatives can be like food businesses, but also just your mom and pop business down the corner. Cooperatives are a way that sole proprietors can actually exit, retire, and the employees buy the owner out. So that money is has a faster cycle in your community if it stays in your community. Depositing your money in a local credit union or a local mutual bank. Those are ways that you can invest in your community. There's also CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions. These are basically banks for the unbankable. They have loan loss reserves, which back your loans. Oftentimes the minimum are $1,000. And that money is going to go to local businesses, affordable housing, childcare. So that's one way that you as an investor can invest in your local community. But also if you are working at a business and you have a 401k plan, ask what the options are that are addressing climate change or other kind of social justice issues. Because if it's not offered, if you ask, and the more people that ask, then they see there's demand, and then they'll make the options for you available. The other thing you can ask for is how are the proxies voted? Every year companies have annual meetings. There are various issues on the ballot. It's something we do at Clean Yield. We file shareholder proposals, which range from everything from we're trying to get rid of NDAs, which is the non-disclosure agreements for sexual harassment settlements, to publishing sustainability reports and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So ask if, the mutual funds that are offered to you, do they have proxy voting guidelines? What are they? So be curious, demand within your companies so that you can be active. And if you do have the ability to invest directly in businesses, think about Iroquois Valley Farms actually has a non-accredited, you can invest in their equity. If you're interested, I can share some information with you later. Certainly, always do your own due diligence, work with your financial planner. But there's so many different ways that you can kind of invest in your community. And I think that really investing in your community and growing that fabric of your community and making sure that that local economy is strong will just make for a much better society.
Thank you. Now we all have a lot of ideas, right, of things that we can do once we leave this call. Any other questions from our audience?
Yeah, I have another question. So do the panelists see different or complementary roles for women and men to play in these issues related to environmental justice?
Coco, do you want to start us off on this one? You talked a little bit earlier about the role of women in this, so maybe you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, I recently got to speak to this Women in Renewable Energy conference, and it was so powerful. It was women owning solar companies, wind companies, putting all of these things together. And there were two things happening here. There was really an opening in the conversation around renewable energy for the role of women in a way that has not happened with the other sort of industrialization jobs and industries, right? So there's not a lot of women in oil and gas. There's not a lot of women in coal. There's not a lot of, and there's this burst of women coming in on renewable energy, which is really kind of exciting. My statement to them was, go, 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 but be careful. What we do not need is to just recreate the same system and put a dress on it, pun intended. What we need instead is for our femininity to be able to lead how we do the work. We can actually care not just about a profit margin, but about the people that we serve. And folks working and building wealth off of renewable energy should be part of the advocacy to transition us off of fossil fuels into clean energy. This was well received. Now, this is not well received in my usual oil and gas audiences and other spaces, but with the women, they could hear that what I was saying was not that you can't make a profit and you can't build your wealth, but we don't have to do that based on domination, oppression, and individual, like whatever this is that we have right now. We could actually do it collectively. We can have a feminine solution to this problem, which means a win-win as opposed to a win-lose. I think the other role really that I see has to do with how we care for each other. This is, if it has not already gotten difficult for you, this is about to be a very difficult time. The care economy is not even visibilized in this country yet, but it must be. Because we don't just need to care for our elders, and we do, and our children, and we do, but we're now dealing with, as many of us can see, the need to care for folks who are going through deep mental anguish. And if you think 2 years of COVID is deep mental anguish, let me tell you, 17 years of recovery is what we're seeing on the ground. You want to know what it looks like for the kids at year 3 and year 4? You want to know what it looks like for the community at year 5 and year 6? It's a tough road. And we haven't gotten to the worst of it yet. I think the care economy has a real role to play in a new climate reality. I think the role of women is being undervalued and not seen. I think the things that we know, how many of us know how to do naturally and others of us are willing to learn, are things that we're going to need in order to keep our communities together. And this never gets talked about in the climate crisis because it's all turning into gases and numbers. But we have to put some humanity back into this. And that is something that across all communities, women seem to understand. Certainly the feminine side of us seems to understand. So I see a real role for women. I also see a real opportunity for African American, Indigenous, and other marginalized communities to really step in, both in leadership around thought, but also into an economy that is actually more inclusive when it's wide open. But this will be the first time, I'm sorry, this will be the first time we see a wide open economy as opposed to an economy that we have to knock on the door of. So.
Thank you. I am looking at the time and I want to make sure that Karin gets a chance to answer this question as well. And then I think we will wrap things up. But Karin, what role do you see for women in this, and how is that different?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. And I'm just gonna, I think the role of women are so important, but I'm just gonna tie it back to what can we do? Childcare is a crisis. Like we really need to address that. There's an organization in Vermont called Let's Grow Kids, and they're actually about to, it's gonna go to the legislature to vote on, and it's a public-private partnership where a certain percentage of childcare is paid. You only have to pay a certain percentage of your salary, and the state will pay the less. So it's only like a $200 million program in Vermont versus a multi-billion program that was completely supported by Vermont. But it basically is guaranteeing childcare for every family. And I think that way women get back in the workplace because they're already oftentimes relegated as a second breadwinner because their salary is lower, and you know, what decisions you make. So that's one thing you can look at is getting active and trying to support childcare, whatever way it may be. But I also think that women have a unique
Oh, sorry. I think Annie just muted herself, but we're hearing some strange things with your sound right now. But I think that your message came through clear about the need for childcare and that this is really a crisis. And so I think maybe at this point, due to the time, we'll wrap it up there. And I want to turn it over back to Una for kind of wrapping up this evening and for thanking our panelists. Una, you're still muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
What a fantastic evening. Ruth, Coco, and Karin, I cannot thank you enough for this inspiring and enlightening conversation. Kenyon women have played a critical role in society and in our beloved alma mater's history, and we will continue to make a significant impact in its future. On behalf of myself and the Kenyon Women Giving Back Steering Committee, thank you all for joining us tonight. This series will continue with another virtual event next spring and then an in-person event over reunion weekend. And as a reminder, all alumni are welcome back to the Hill this year and every year for reunion. The mission of Kenyon Women Giving Back is to celebrate and amplify our impact on the college and the world by building connections and philanthropic support. Our gifts to the Kenyon Fund provide much needed support for all the things we love about Kenyon, which both of our speakers spoke so fondly about tonight. The Kenyon Women Giving Back Steering Committee encourage each of you to consider a gift to the Kenyon Women's Annual Scholarship Fund, which will make an impact on female identifying students today. But no matter how you choose to support Kenyon, your gift can directly enhance the educational experience of Kenyon students who are following in your footsteps. We hope you will join us in supporting future alumni and visit gift.kenyon.edu to make a gift. Finally, we would love your feedback on this event, suggestions for future event topics, and ideas for how to continue to engage Kenyon women. We will follow up with an email that includes a survey and of course a link to make that gift. You can also send your ideas directly to Annie Gordon, our wonderful organizer for tonight's event, at gordon3@kenyon.edu. Thank you again to our speakers and Ruth, and I wish you all a very good night. Bye.